In the past 6 years, Illinois has nearly doubled its total appropriation. And one state senator says that's alarming. Back at it. Good morning, Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. We've talked about this since last week. A report from the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability showed annual appropriations practically doubling, increasing 95% since fiscal 2018. And you're looking at back then, 6 years ago, the total appropriations the state was set to spend was $99 billion. Now, that was far higher than what we were told was the $38 billion in state spending. And there's always the state spending that's reported on by media year after year after year, and it's gone up every year since then. State spending has. To where the most recent budget that started July 1st set to spend $50.4 billion in state general revenue funds. But that's not the total amount of tax dollars that Illinois state government spends. They get billions from federal pass-through dollars, including billions from special funds, for a total of $195 billion they're set to spend this year. Let me be more accurate. $193.5 billion they're set to spend this fiscal year. So you're talking a 95% increase from fiscal year 2018 of $99 billion to $193.5 billion for the fiscal year that just started July 1st of this year. And talked with State Senator Dave Syverson. He's a Republican from Cherry Valley. He is on the Commission for Government Forecasting and Accountability, and he reacts to this number of practically doubling in 6 years as to how much the state's spending.
Both the federal and the state, if you look at the total spending that's coming through the appropriations process, it's growing at an alarming rate. Certainly something that's not sustainable. There were a number of federal programs that they started, or grants, or money from COVID dollars that clearly the federal government is at a point where they can't keep spending at that level. Neither can the state. And so that's the frustration, is how do you rein in some of the spending when so much of it, unfortunately, is going into base spending, which is hard to reverse. So we look at, for example, the amount we're spending in healthcare, especially undocumented, it's very difficult to reduce that. When you see how much is going to education and pensions, hard to reduce that. So even when we run into tough times, the issue is you can eliminate certain programs, or programs that don't get good returns, but those are small in dollar amounts compared to the major obligations of healthcare and education and pensions, which are growing at rates that are much faster than what the economy is growing at.
And again, State Senator Dave Syverson, a conversation I had with him on Friday, just to go over some of these numbers. Use of special funds has increased from $36.1 billion to $70.1 billion, or up 94% in 6 years. Highway funds from the federal government, increased 123.5% in that time frame. Illinois doubled its state's gas tax in 2019, allowing it to capture more federal funds for things like highways. Debt service is also it's about stable, about $4 billion over the past 6 years per year. Federal trust fund, here's what's interesting, it spiked in fiscal 2022 at $31.7 billion. That's a 286.5% increase from fiscal 2018's level of $8.2 billion. And since fiscal 2022, federal trust funds have decreased to $22.3 billion. So we see a decrease in the amount of federal funds coming into the state, But that has not decreased the state's spending. The state's general revenue fund spending is up 36% since fiscal 2018, increasing each year over the past 6 years. So Syverson, he talked about the migrant funding, the healthcare subsidies that are going to people over the age of 65 in the country undocumented. That's a budgeted item of $550 million this fiscal year, and no federal matching dollars go for that program. He also mentioned K through 12 spending and how that increases every year, and the state's increasing that by $350 million each year. Pension costs, Syverson mentioned. Those cost the state one of every 5 tax dollar it brings in, for a total of $10 billion just this year alone. But one thing that is interesting is, how do we move on from here? Is the state going to reduce its spending at all? Again, here's State Senator Syverson.
Clearly, it crowds out other programs. We saw that in this year's budget when you had close to $1 billion going to undocumented health care. At the same time, our families that have children with severe developmental disabilities are still on waiting lists. And so, yes, it clearly is going to crowd out programs. And the response is always from the other side, well, let's just raise taxes. Well, it comes to a point where you can't keep raising taxes on working families. We've increased fees, we've increased taxes, and working families are struggling and can't pay more. And so government has to learn to live within their means, just like taxpayers have to do. The ruling party doesn't have enough members that are willing to make adult decisions to say we can't keep spending at this level. But clearly, a cliff is coming, and unfortunately for Illinois, it's in the next 12 to 24 months. We're going to be facing literally billions of dollars of shortfall, and will they have the desire to make the kind of cuts necessary to balance that, or are they just going to ask for more tax increases?
So obviously, he says that it's unsustainable to have this level of spending, and you got to take into consideration all kinds of other factors like economic factors. And while several months ago it was thought that we were heading towards a recession, there's some promising indicators that that's not going to be the case. Even the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, for their most recent report, their monthly report for July, they said, quote, the month ended with GDP results indicating the economy had accelerated in the second quarter. While all this was happening, inflation continued to slow. Overall, the threat of a recession in the near term appears to be abating, with continued slow growth expected in the second half of the year. So maybe we don't have a recession, but is it possible we could have a slowing of the economy? I asked Syverson to react to that.
Well, a combination. You're going to see increases in revenue because of the increases in salaries. So when you give, state employees, the largest increase ever, when you raise minimum wage, you increase it. So that does generate more revenue, but it also generates more expenditures, because as salaries go up, that means government employee salaries go up, pensions go up, costs for other social programs all go up. So one of the disadvantages of salaries going up is cost goes up for government and social programs. And while there may not be the talk about a full-blown recession, there's clearly going to be a slowdown. We're already seeing it some when mortgage rates are going up, and when mortgage rates go up, and then you start coupling that with increased taxes, families have less disposable income, and so we're going to see a slowing of the economy. And as a state, we're not really prepared for that. Which, if we were really focusing our energies on improving our jobs climate, and we were creating more base across the board type jobs, then you're ready for a recessionary time. But at this point, with better paying manufacturing jobs leaving the state, that is clearly an indication that we're going in the wrong direction. So as a state, we can fix the problem, but you can only do that by growing your way out. You can't tax your way into prosperity. No state, no country has ever taxed their way into prosperity. You grow your way, and that means you limit spending and you improve your jobs climate. And those are two things that, unfortunately, Illinois has not been doing. But if we do, then I think we can still get through this. But if we keep increasing spending at record levels like we did this year, we are facing significant cliffs that are going to be very difficult to deal with.
So, warning from a state senator on the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability about possible impacts of an economic slowdown and what that could mean to state finances, especially with already high taxes and decreased population, and something we hear from the business community time and again, not having a friendly business community. So how all that's going to impact this continued increase of state spending, nearly double over the past 6 years.